I barely believe. I believe in a higher power, like when I see a beautiful sunset or a moon, but I really don't believe in God. I mean, I'm going to say that out loud. And it's this organized hatred and homophobia that it's like it's not a good look for Christianity.
Welcome, everybody, to Growing Up Boston with Dave Donahue.
How we doing, Mikey?
I'm doing good today. We had a weird deal. We had 60-degree weather, a blizzard, and then 60-degree weather all in like the same 4 days. So,
Welcome to global warming.
yeah. Yeah. Thanks,
I
Aljo.
posted something. I posted something the other day where people were like lounging in this pothole, like it was a hot tub. Because this back and forth creates these massive sinkholes. And
Oh, really?
yeah. That's how potholes get created. Hot, cold, hot, cold. So yeah, it was kind of funny. People are always talking about the Bostonian potholes.
Oh, no, it's real because there's not they're not out here. We don't have them.
Right, right.
So,
You see an alignment, a front end shop around every corner.
yeah, advertisement. Come
Yeah,
get your car aligned.
right.
You know what we don't have out here that you guys have that we had in Boston is stickers. We don't have to get a sticker for your car here. You could actually register a piece of crap, like it doesn't matter if the thing's running on, you know, alcohol. I mean, it
Where
doesn't
were
matter.
you when I was making $12,000 a year and driving? I drove a car once. I'm not kidding. I used it for about 3 days. I used the emergency brake only. I had no brakes. The line got cut. The brake line not got cut but rotted off. Yeah, I remember it was the 1973 Plymouth Satellite. Yeah, no brakes, Mike. The emergency brake.
Hey,
That's
what about,
poverty. I was probably like I was probably like 17, 18.
yeah, we all have our stories. All right. So last week we got some feedback, Davey. What did we get?
Yeah, so a lot of people commented on the honesty and the openness that you and I are able to characterize through these podcasts. But for me and Mike, this is how we talk. This is how I don't want to say we always communicate like this, but there has been some level of look, there's no BS in our family. It's just all, nobody even tries to be, have any kind of image management in our family. It's just not, it's grassroots, you know what I mean? It's just, um, so there's that. But, and since we've gotten together more recently, it's been even more open. So I'm always taken back when somebody says, oh, wow, you're so open and honest and authentic with one another. I just don't know how to be any other way. And I don't think you do either, really. So,
No, I mean, in my business, you have to. I talk to educators and stuff, and you can't be too real.
right.
Uh, but no, when it comes to family stuff, yeah, you have to. I think people really appreciate the fact that a couple of older guys too, um, not just brothers or whatever, but like we're boomers, and so uh, that whole
You're a
thing.
boomer. I'm right on the line.
Are
So,
you?
oh yeah, yeah. 65 it was the cutoff year for the ex
You're
boys.
60. All right, so back up. You're old. You're old.
Potato, right? Spoken to like a true boomer.
I think that whole idea of a couple older guys talking about their feelings. That's one of the feedback things I got this week was somebody saying, it's just cool to see a couple older guys like talking about their like what's really how they felt about stuff. And
Right,
but
yeah.
I think that more people should do that. I think it's mentally healthy for you to share how you're really feeling. Obviously, you got to be safe and you got to feel like someone's going to hear you, but I mean, that's one thing that I really appreciate about you is that, the last 4 years that we've started talking again more, frequently. Um, is that you listen, and we talk about how things were, and even some of this stuff's been painful. Some of it for both of us, like, you know, unpacking the roles in our family. They automatically put us against each other. That's an awkward conversation. I mean, that
Right.
is an awkward conversation
Yep.
because there's hurt associated with
Um.
that on both sides. So that, but you have to talk about that. You have to be able to be,
Oh.
willing to look at your own stuff.
Right. Um. Some of the other feedback that I got were people telling me, a few people on TikTok relayed their own stories about what they went through in the 70s. And so, I mean, that's part of the goal here, is to just get a conversation going again. I mean, a lot of people at my age have stuffed all that stuff. And, when you stuff that stuff, yeah. Um, it becomes part of who you are, like the shame and the, talking it out and getting it out there and talking about, that brutal gay bashing that, was right in our neighborhood. Um, Getting that out there is actually a path to kind of like putting it behind you.
Yeah.
So, it's not all just shock value for me anyway. It's, I have to kind of like feel it again. I don't want to get too, triggery and blah blah blah. But I mean, stuffing it away and not talking about it, and then talking about it openly and publicly, is another level of kind of like letting it go, I guess.
Right.
Right.
And I think, like, starting out that video last week of with me saying basically, I admitted that there was homophobia involved in my life because it was our culture and that's the way, it was back then. I did get some feedback on that, all positive. Nobody was like, you shouldn't have said that. It was like, wow, you had the guts to do that. But you have to have those conversations. You can't deny that stuff. Like, you got to be real, because you can't progress and grow if you're not willing to be honest where you started from. That's where I started from, right? And so I'm not there anymore. I'm not a homophobic person. One of the things that I thought about, that um, a story that kind of goes along with this. I wish I would have talked about it last week, but I was in a men's Bible study one time. It was not too long ago. It was a couple of years ago, and this guy got up. Long story short, I was visiting this Bible study because I used to go to it years ago, and I went back to it, and I'll never go again. But anyways, it was a men's Bible study, and this guy was talking about how he was talking to a guy about Jesus Christ, and this guy was gay. The guy that he was talking to was gay, and he was trying to convince him he needed Jesus, whatever. And so this is what he said. He said, he stopped, like, you said, yeah, I talked to this guy who's gay, and I was talking about Jesus, and he goes, you know what? I don't mind talking to people about Jesus who are gay, but I wish he would turn the flame down a little bit. I couldn't believe he said it. And I was like, I just was kind of ignoring, like, this, kind of letting it, bathe over me, whatever. And then all of a sudden he said that, and I was like, I looked up at him and I was like, what the heck did you just say? So instead of me just sitting there quietly being angry about it, I did say something. I said, what did you just say? And he said it again, and I went after him. I lit this guy up because basically what he was saying is, your flamboyant personality, which translates being gay, is offensive to me.
So that kid that was, a victim of that gay bashing in Weymouth that we talked about last week, he didn't have the option of turning his flame down. He that was just naturally who he was.
Right.
So, there was he didn't have that option. I'm
That's
sure if he
exactly why I
did,
that, because that guy was basically saying, this guy's representing Jesus supposedly, right? Because he's talking about Jesus, and he's thinking, I wish he wouldn't. This is offensive to me, which means it's offensive, which to these guys in the room sitting there listening to him, it's like basically they would say, Jesus is God or whatever, is offended by this guy's flamboyant personality. I just couldn't believe it. So I lit him up, and then he ended up apologizing. It became a thing because the guy that runs the Bible study got pretty mad at me, and then we ended up having a meeting about it, and that's why I'm never going back. I got kicked out of the men's Bible study
You
because
know,
I let that
yeah,
guy.
um, it's things when I hear things like that, I'm I struggle with the whole concept of God. I think that Jesus was a real person. You know, and when you talk about the Bible, talk about a bestseller. I mean, whether you think it's fiction or nonfiction, it's statements like that guy made in that Bible study, uh, which it's almost the antithesis of Christianity. So um, it's one of the main reasons why the lack of acceptance and statements like that, like it's okay, we'll be gay, but I wish you turn your flame down a little bit. Like I wish you would not be who you are.
Right.
That's not a Christian concept that I'm aware of. So I still struggle with I don't even want to call myself an agnostic. I'm borderline atheist. I just and it's those kinds of situations that push me away from Christianity. And I just got to be honest about that. I barely I believe in a higher power, like when I see a beautiful sunset or a moon, but I really don't believe in God. I mean, I'm going to say that out loud. And it's this organized hatred and homophobia that it's not a good look for Christianity, right? So, that's kind of where I'm at with that. I know that you have an opposite view, and you've been trying to discover your own sense of Christianity. But I just I remember when our father, he turned to this assembly. Not I don't know if it was Assemblies of God. I don't know what the dogma was, but he was a born again Christian. That was the term that they used back then, and that he just absolved himself of any wrongdoing, or like he was saved by Jesus. But I'm still eating welfare cheese, right? So, like, it was during that time when we were young that he was allegedly saved by Jesus, but never paid a dime in child support. That's not like that's what I mean by the antithesis. It's the opposite of what Christianity it purports to be. So, and then I told you about that time when his wife said to me that I'll I'll answer for my sins, the sin of being gay. When I meet my maker, basically, that's what she said. I went back at her with a real zinger, but those are my examples. Like my father is the example for me of Christianity, and it's not a real good one, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, and yeah, I mean, to get into this a little bit, I'm in that battle of because I do believe in God, but I don't believe in the church. I don't believe in Christianity. Like I wouldn't call myself a Christian today. I call myself a believer of the some of the concepts that Jesus taught. But as far as American Christianity goes, I have another podcast called Groom.Connect, and me and my friend Brian get on there every week, and we talk about this stuff. All these scandals that are happening in the church, that you talk about the antithesis of Christianity. We need a 12-year-old girl that was molested by a minister, and then he became this famous guy that's one of the biggest churches in the evangelical movement. You got Mike Bickle and this guy Robert Morris and Bill Hybels and all these names that are big names in the evangelical church that I know that have all fallen because of morality and because of the system of Christianity. The way American church has projected Christianity onto the world creates what you just said. It creates this doubt about God, which makes me angry, because not at you, obviously, but at them, because they're not representing Christianity the way I think it really is. And when I say I think it really is, it's because I'm still in process. I'm still trying to figure out what I believe about all that, right? And so, but then when I see this stuff, and you get all these big names. I worked for a televangelist. I saw the underbelly of how the money works,
I know you did, yeah.
the upselling of products when people are vulnerable. I mean, I can go on and on because I was in the middle of it. I was a I was in the middle of it. And so it breaks my heart because I do think there is a genuine love that God has for us that goes beyond our behavior. Whatever you want to call sin, I don't even it's whatever. It doesn't matter. It like that the church puts an emphasis on behavior, and I feel like God puts an emphasis on love and who we are, and we're working out our own process instead of going into this Christian factory and becoming into get your playbook and you become what they want you to be, and it becomes
Image management,
yeah,
right?
behavior
Yeah.
modification. And I can't stand that. I can't stand that. And from what I read about Jesus in the Bible, I don't think that's the way it was. In fact, Gandhi said this. He said, "I like your Jesus, but your Christians are nothing like your Jesus." And I 100% believe that. I really do believe that the American church has grossly misrepresented God and who he, because it's capitalism. They've just turned it into uh, you know, a capitalistic. It's $1 billion industry. The
Of
Christian
course, right.
music and churches and Church in a Box and all that. The mega churches. It's $1 billion industry, and that's what it's turned into. It's just an industry. It's a factory
Right,
of
right,
behavior modification, and I can't stand it.
right. I mean, for me, I you know, I'm over analytical about a lot of things. I kind of read the room a lot easier than some people. And even when I was that young, the incongruency of my father's behavior and what he was trying to sell me and everybody else around him. It automatically, it didn't make any sense to me. Like, how can this guy call himself a Christian and then let his kids go hungry? Right. So, and that was my blueprint for Christianity, and it hasn't washed off yet. I mean, it just hasn't.
Understand,
So,
I understand that. I
right,
so and just for context, I remember when Dad and I had this because I was a Christian and Dad was a Christian, and I honestly didn't become a Christian because of Dad. I had a genuine experience that was outside of him, that out here in Nebraska that was pretty strong in my life. So, but it just happened to be that we kind of, because he was a Christian, I was a Christian. I thought, oh, we're all on the same page. And then one day when I had a son, I'm gonna start crying. When I had a son and I saw how much I loved that kid, and I would do freaking anything for him. And then my daughters were born, and it was like, oh my God, there's no way I could ever abandon these kids. And I started to go after Dad a little bit and started questioning him. And then he started throwing the Bible at me. But by this time, I had become a pastor and I'd gone through training, and I knew the Bible more than him because he was like a truck driver reading his Bible at lunch. I was studying it. And so I remember like getting on his ass about driving by our sister's apartment on his way to church, and I went 5 years without talking to him because I was like, Dad, you're not really representing God the way David, Karen, Patty needs you to. And he got mad at me, and I remember I was back in Boston for visiting. I was for business or something, and I ended up sitting in his car talking to him about it. And that was the last time I talked to him for like 5 years. And then I talked to him a couple of years before he died, and that was it. But that was a strain in our relationship because I was like, you're not really representing God the way you say you are. And it was a wedge. It definitely was a wedge in our relationship. But I
yeah.
couldn't stand it.
I gave Dad an opportunity one time, and I've told you this story before. I brought my nephew Justin over to see him when Justin was about 2.5, 3 years old, and I loved that kid like I never loved anybody before in my life. I mean, I couldn't imagine somebody not, you know, gushing over him. Strangers, anybody, right? So I bring him over to meet Dad, and I'm thinking if there's some redemption here, if there's some Christian, um, uh, attitude here, it's not with me anymore because that ship has sailed. Right, I went through the food stamps and all that crap, and it's with your grandkids. And I brought him over there, and he was flatlined, like he has been most of his life. I couldn't, and it was at that point there was a moment there where Justin and I were out in the backyard, and Justin got scared of something, came running towards me because he equated me with being, with safety, whatever. And I was looking at Dad, watch that reaction, and there was nothing there, Michael. It was this empty, cold nothing. And I thought, this guy's done. Like, there's no, this is who he is. There was, I mean, I couldn't imagine anybody not loving Justin. I mean, not, this was his flesh and blood, his grandson, nothing there. That's not Christianity to me. That's just the abyss. And that's what I felt like. Right. So the whole thing was so hypocritical. And to this day, I still have a bad taste in my mouth.
I'm embarrassed for Dad. I'm embarrassed for Christians that you feel that way. I'm embarrassed. And that tension for me is I'm struggling with the idea that I still do believe in God, but I know that Christians in general, and specifically Dad and other people that have been in your life, have disappointed you and not shown you what I think is the real thing. But that's, there's nothing I can do about that.
It's their own dogma that they contradict.
Right.
So, it's sort of like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture. Like, remember Sesame Street? One of these things is not what it should be. One of these things just isn't the same. Like, we learned that concept at 3 years old. Like, right. Yeah, something's not right here. Right. So to wrap things up, I think that, well, first of all, I'd like to say that I know that Jesus saved your life. I can say that without a doubt. He just did. I mean, coming from the place that we came from, you had two paths that you were going to go to. I know you talked about your girlfriend kind of, putting you on the straight and narrow, but I don't think that was enough. I think that once you left home, and like you said, you met that person that brought you to a church in a bar room. I think you said that, right? Yeah. So, your life could have taken a much darker path than it did. So with all the struggles that you went through with, like you said, seeing the underbelly of organized religion, I think the general blueprint that you got from your Christian journey was that of love, and that it saved your life, because like I said, you were at a crossroads back then. You were 19, 18 years old, and there were a lot of temptation out there. So to say that, I mean, you could have done a lot worse. And I think that, your journey into the Assemblies of God Church, and I think it opened up your eyes to your own abilities, that, people saw in you what you didn't really see in yourself. And they used it for nefarious or, selfish purposes, but they at least showed you that you had this value. And, I can't, I mean, they saved your life, really. That was my take on it. Like, I didn't, like, when we were, estranged from one another, and you were getting really into this Assemblies of God church, I still thought in the back of my mind, like, this is what saved my brother. No matter, how I feel, or, what I think of things, coming from the house that we came from, Michael, there were two routes, and you picked the least destructive. And, and again, I think that you were able to, I always try to take, when we come out from these traumatic situations, I always try to take, extrapolate some kind of good out of it. Like, okay, this is what happened, but I learned this, or something along those lines. So, and if you can do that with like, because we came through some pretty traumatic stuff, but in that journey that brought us here. So that's how you have to look at things. I don't want to get into a rabbit hole with it, but that's my take on your journey.
I think that's a good take. And all right, so David helped me write this book a couple years ago. I wrote, or actually released it last year, but I've been writing it for a couple of years. It's called Groomed. And it's my journey of what happened in Boston. I was involved in a sex trafficking ring, and we'll talk about that at some point when I was in 8th grade. And then I got involved in the church. And that's what I saw in the church was, yeah, David's right. It saved my life. And I got sucked into a leadership role in the Assemblies of God and in a larger youth ministry. And then I saw a lot of bad stuff. And what I did see was the same techniques that they used on me in Boston to get me involved in these crazy things was the same techniques they use in the church, which is bait and switch, right? It's I love you, I love you, I love you. Now here's the conditions. And
Right.
that's not, in my opinion, that's not who God is. And so I wrote this book for a lot of the people that was stuck in that same system. And it's been crazy. My last year of my life has been really crazy because I've gotten a lot of feedback. I've got some enemies, people that really don't like the fact that I exposed the church in this way. I'm not the only one doing it. I mean, all you got to do is Google deconstruction, faith deconstruction right now, and you're probably going to run into my book. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and I guess I am grateful for the impact that it's had on me, that how God used it. I would put it this way: that how God used even that dysfunctional system. He used it to help me get my head straight, because I was pretty crazy at that time when I was 19. So I'm grateful, I am. But then getting into that system and seeing how ugly it is, and seeing that I have a unique position because I saw like selfishness on some pretty strong levels when I was a teenager, with people using love to lure you into awful stuff. The church does the same thing. I mean, I'm painting this with a broad brush. Not every church does that, but the churches that I was involved with, they did the same thing. They love bombed you until you were compliant, and then they put conditions on that love. And I'm just as my study has, I've gotten into, more Bible study or whatever. That's not who God is. That's not who Jesus was. He didn't do it that way. And so that's my tension, of dealing with that. And so this has been a good conversation. I think,
Yeah.
it's been good. So
As usual.
ABD.
Mikey.
All right. We'll see you next week,
See you
kids.
next week. Tune in.
Miles.
Ciao for now, man.
All right. Bye.